But on the other thing, the militarization is still here, so it shows that there is still some tension, right? I was agreeing with the fact that in reality, because of economic problems and stuff, war are not gonna happen that easily, especially nowadays. Also, yeah, technically, because there were no treaty of peace. No, it was just a ceasefire. How do you say? It's hard to answer, to be honest. Yeah. Yes.
So you kind of agree on both sides?
I kind of agree on both sides. I was more on the it's not going to happen, but I'm still thinking it's not. It's something we can like answer easily. I really agree on both sides. Because we have no proof anyway that it's not going to happen, right?
That's correct. What? Yes.
Is there anyone who has similar thoughts like that?
Personally, for me, I think everyone, like Delegate kind of said, like we don't know kind of situation, but I think if you keep thinking like I don't know, then the answer should be no. There's no possibility of safety because safety should be secured answer. Like for sure, I don't know how to say this anyway. As a U.S. citizen, before I came to Korea, everyone always questioned me like, why are you going to Korea? Isn't it dangerous? So I don't know how it's like in UK, Europe, everywhere else, but my family was terrified for me to come. I was the only one in even my high school friends that knew like the situation in South Korea and everything. So unless you actually studied the culture, studied everything within East Asia, then you would think that this region is safe. So I think it's an issue of more education in the West for this type of issue, and I want to go back to the. I think I forgot who mentioned that the DMZ was a use of propaganda. I'm not sure who mentioned that. Okay. I personally didn't ever think of it as like propaganda. I thought it was a necessary border between the two countries that have a ceasefire. But with me being here for so long, I can tell like South Koreans don't think of the war. It's kind of a joke, but like you don't have to worry about being here. We feel safe, but I don't know how North Koreans feel. Like if they feel safe or not, kind of thing. So my thoughts are all over the place. Sorry, but I want to finish off with Trump is my president. I didn't vote for him, but I'm gonna be very blunt. I didn't vote for him. I don't believe in him or anything. But I want you guys to think about the power of a leader that is power-driven, that has no filter, has no fear of what is politically correct or what is right to say or what to do in a political climate. So when it comes to Kim Jong-un, like whatever he could do, the potential's high. Like if Trump can do anything and what he's done so far, then Kim Jong-un can do even more damage. So all over the place.
Thank you for your thoughts.
I think it's like an interesting point to, like, our point of view to bring up this question about like how other people who did not reside in South Korea like works about this question, and I think that also responds to some parts about this Korean War, like the how it's paused right now is somewhat like used for more like political device. Because like on the media, it's really talked seriously about, like people talk about it like the words actually can break out. So when you actually sit in here, like in Korean Peninsula, like me living in here, but people when I'm in my states, just like your experience, like people are really freaking out about it. They're like, oh, there's going to be a war in your country. Are you okay? But I'm sitting here, totally fine. So I think that's one of the proofs that DMZ is one of the factors of, like, one of parts of Korean War. But the Korean War itself, it exists for, like, why? It exists for some of the politicians to use it for their own sake, to politicize people and polarize people. And that tactic exists within Korean Peninsula as well, when Korean, like, politicians are running for parts and stuff. And I think that's, like, another side of this whole question that we can discuss about, I think.
Besides that, right here we have you guys who are actually abroad from all over the world, and it's quite unique to say, and I think we guys talk about the fact that, like you mentioned, when you decided to come to Korea, you feel that Korea is not safe from war, but although you are still here today in Korea, so I think that'll be a very interesting topic to talk about as well. But before that, some delegates, maybe a delegate from Chile, do you have any opinions about that?
Yeah, just hearing everyone's like opinion, it really breaks my mind on the point that I was like, yes, I'm on this side, and they're like, oh, that's a good point, and then you just go and comment. But the thing is that I go with you, Megan, because my parents are like freaked out. Like, even when I already lived here 4 years, I really get the call in the morning. They're like, are you okay? Like, we heard from the news of bombings and stuff like that, and you don't know, like, while living in South Korea, you're like, oh, everything's fine. Like, I was like, I didn't even know, I just woke up. So, on a point, DMZ is working to let us, like, live in the dream that there's nothing going wrong. But at the same time, I just really agree with what she said. We don't know what's going on the other side of the border. To be honest, for me, why did I choose yes? It's because until when are you gonna say we're South Koreans and they're North Koreans? Until when are you gonna keep on just living like two countries of Korea, or are you gonna go and just, okay, let's go ahead and just make one big country? If you're gonna be making a big country, I feel like nobody's gonna be like, I'll give you my part, come here. Like, there's no way. And a plus point is that right now, South Korea has like, just like here he said, you're a big part of the United Nations and everything. So you guys have like, you can see it as the bodyguards behind you, We're like South Korea, and we have all these people, all these countries supporting us because we're a democracy, because we do this stuff. But at the same time, North Korea does have support from other countries as well. So if you see it that way, if there's a moment where they want to be one country again, I feel like the disaster is imminent, because there's no one that's going to be sitting down with you and me and be like, okay, let's just be one big country. Yeah, that's why I'm just trying to get my mind on the point, but everyone's opinion is just like, it makes sense on both of the sides. So yeah, that's my
We just started from Korea is safe from war or not. Only just talking about North Korea and South Korea. But there's China, Japan, and also other Pacific countries. I think we have to understand this one. This relationship between two countries, not only between two countries. There is China, Russia, and sometimes Japan, also North Korean side. On the other side, USA is South Korean part. So the relationship between those countries is very important, especially China and USA. If China and USA are good, it's a good relationship, then North Korea and South Korea will be also nice. But if they have a problem, if they fight each other, and economically and politically, if they fight each other, then because China is has a big role in this peaceful situation. If China helps to this problem, maybe some part of Russia sometimes, but China is the main country in this peaceful peninsula of Pacific. China has a big.
I mean, thank you for delegate of Turkey as a South Korean that said Korea is quite strong, but it's not enough to stop every consequences. So yeah, that's why as South Korean sometimes I feel I feel like I have no power to this problem. actually from there, that's why I think it's not safe, because the possibility of what happening is not up in Korea sometimes. So
Can we still have more? It's, I think we already talked a lot, but isn't it?
You don't have to worry about that.
Right, well,
Everybody can add on to the conversation,
yeah,
so
it's
you don't
not
have to be,
very,
you
yeah.
don't have to be pressured if like, oh, if I took too much, no, that's not a problem.
Okay, all right, got it, thank you. So, I acknowledge the answer of our delegate from Turkey, but, if you involve other countries, then you're just going against your argument that Korea is safe for more. Because if we look at the way the international affairs, like everything now is really, uncertain. Let's say, for example, the trade war between the US and China. So you mentioned that the US is closely tied with South Korea and China with North Korea. So if you unite them, so you can see the bigger picture that even these, it's the anti-ballistic missile system that was installed in South Korea with the US. How can you do that if there's no quality of war? Aside that, the multiple testing of missiles of North Korea and their provocative actions, such as the demolition of the unification office in North Korea. So these actions, we cannot turn a blind eye on them. They exist, it happens. So there's this possibility that we need to acknowledge, and once everyone is aware that there's a possibility of war, then everyone will be more engaged for that not to happen by pursuing the Korean Peninsula unification. So that's what I have to say.
Okay, so the delegate of Philippines asked two questions to those who think Korea is safe from war. The first one was installation of that. The second one is multiple testing of ballistic missile. Is there anyone who?
I think I would love to hear some opinions from the China on this topic.
Actually, I think China really did a lot of efforts on the peace of Korea, South Korea and North Korea, and I think like China, I really think China really don't want to fight, but actually the situation is like in South Korea, they also the nuclear power issue. Like now the situation is like Japan and America, they're the ally, and China and Russia are allied, and actually the South Korea, they have their own thoughts. So I think it is really, really very difficult to, how to say, to put on the like international desk. Then everyone has their own, okay, just like for us, China, we think we're peaceful, but other
Turkey mentioned about China and the US nations, so I would like to hear some ideas from the US delegates as well. Yes.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Just adding on the ideas about the topic that Korea is not, we're not only just talking about the safety of the war about the South and North, but there are more nations related to it, and that's
Yeah, so I think this was a really fascinating, well thought out answers all around. It's, I just said, I feel like there's almost like 6 conversations going on. Talking about China and Europe. So I'm like, where do we start?
you can start from the beginning and you
So-
can have 6 conversations.
I think the delegate from the Philippines has had, very well thought out. I agree with him on all that things. Is war possible? Well, war is currently going on. It's an armistice, the most technical definition on the war of what a war is. That's happening. I think even this shots fired across the DMZ, things like this are continually ongoing. It's usually not really related to South Korea and North Korea fighting, but more to who knows what. But for the DMZ, I think the delegate, I wrote a note that the DMZ is more to keep the North Koreans in, I would say, than it is to keep the South Koreans out. I think North Korea's power comes a lot from how they control their information and how they control their borders. So it's because I think the delegate from the Philippines mentioned that normally countries have very open borders, there's an immigration system, there's visas issued. I don't know any other countries that issue citizenship just for getting onto their soil. So I think that that's something that North Korea is very afraid of. As soon as any of their citizens enter South Korea, they're gone, can't get them back. There's no more ways to do that. When it comes to international relations as brought by the delegate from Turkey, I think it is very important to think about how all the different nations interact with each other. I think it's important to note though that North Korea is relatively isolated, I would say, in the international community compared to everyone else. Obviously, South Korea is very integrated. I mean, we have an amazing bureau or round table here tonight. But the DPRK is much more isolated, much fewer allies, much fewer people you can turn to, and I think that is but China right now is in a bit of a difficult spot, I believe. I think hegemon instability theory, China's rising, and China really needs, as the delegate from China herself said, China wants peace. I think that no one is saying that China's trying to war on, but the Korean Peninsula is a bit of a wild card right now, and the relationship between the DPRK and the ROK and the USA and China itself, all of these need to be very stable for China to continue to grow at the rapid rate they're growing. And I feel like I'm talking a lot. I don't know if I covered all the topics, but I think particularly emphasizing on the relationship between North Korea and China might be the most telling of how North Korea behaves, in my opinion, just from how I've seen. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts. Thanks.
How about right next, Susan? Your thoughts about this?
As you said, there's been a lot of conversation. Everyone's brought up really interesting points. There's one thing that I want to talk about, which was brought up by the delegate from America, about how South Korea has the demilitarized zone, and that they created this to kind of keep since they signed the ceasefire. So they created the demilitarized zone to kind of keep the terms that they set straight, and for that not to change, it feels like. But then at the same time, she also said that while South Korea might feel safe, it might not be the same for North Korea. And I feel like that might be one of the reasons as to why they lash out randomly at some points, because of the fact that they do not feel safe themselves. Which brings me to the point of wanting to say that that kind of symbolizes the importance of not just signing a ceasefire, how important it is to actually, so the fact that they need to form some kind of peace or an agreement in that sense, because right now they still feel like something might happen, they don't feel safe in front of each other still, and I think that's the biggest issue. If they could come to terms in that sense, I think that they would be able to go forward much further than they have in these many years. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone would like to add on? On the Thailand. Yes.
At first, I wanted to say Korea is safe from war because the last war was in 1953, and since then until now it's like 67 years already, and there's nothing like a real full-scale war happened in Korea compared to the war in Southeast Asia, which is Vietnam War. It just finished in 1975, which is more recent than the Korean one. So. It's been 67 years, and I didn't really, see what's really risky and dangerous happening in Korea at first. That's why I think it's also one kind of peace for not having war until now. But at the same time, I want to say it's dangerous still because we all don't know what the leader of North Korea is thinking. We don't know what he's going to act in the future as well. And a few years ago, he just shook hands with Moon Jae-in, president, and in the perspective of foreigners like me and other people think, oh, this is a good sign, this is a symbol of something good in the future. But then, 2 months ago, he just exploded the office of Southern North Korea, and as long as he still hold nuclear weapons and threat. To the other countries, I think it's hard to say that it's 100% safe. So that's why I'm kind of go for a little more not 100% safe, but still a little bit dangerous at this time.
sharing opinions on our many numerous conversations.
This is so difficult to explain. But in my opinion, a few years ago, when I visited GMC, it was so sad for me. But really, I don't like conflict between two countries. Yes, so I'm thinking that Korea is one country. This is a big country. So I think maybe ZMZ is I would like to make just peace. Yes,
So I think maybe we can also see in a different side because the DMZ is not like just safe or not or dangerous or not. I think it is just a rule, it is just a how to say way of risk management. It is just to manage the risk. Like it is not like it is safe or not safe. It is just a management of the risk.
That's a new perspective to the next topic.
Thank you. So we have heard everyone's opinions regarding the safety of the Korean Peninsula. So we're gonna finalize our thoughts. So again, if you think Korea is safe from the war, please raise your hand again. First.
So, first, the delegates from 3 nations chose Turkey, UK, and Cuba chose that Korea is safe from war. So I think if you have changed your mind, please raise your hand and state that you changed or you haven't changed your opinion on the thoughts. And those who pick Korea is not safe from war, please decide as well if you still think that Korea is not safe from war or still safe from war. Yes. Should we vote again to finalize our opinions? Okay, are you guys still deciding? So who thinks that Korea is safe from war?
I think we should have some middle one.
Can we choose both? Yeah, I think every nation will.
Yeah, I need three. Middle.
Do you guys need more time or?
I think Philippine delegation delegate explained it nicely, technically and reality. So that's very important explanation, I think. So I keep my idea. Korea is very safe from war.
And how about the region have you changed your mind?
In my case, I think it's more like different shades of gray because, like I mentioned in the beginning, no country is 100% ever like immune from war. It can happen anywhere at any time. But at the same time, I believe that Korea is a safe country. I've never ever felt in danger while living in Korea. Whereas, I mean, I grew up in Lebanon, I grew up in Spain, I grew up in Cuba, and those countries, even though they're not in war with anyone, I felt slightly less safe than in Korea. So I don't want to say that Korea is not safe from war, but I feel like I want to maintain my position. But at the same time, I don't want to say, oh, this is completely black and this is completely white. But yeah, I'm going to keep my position even though all the delegates have said really interesting points. And yeah, we have had, I feel, a really good discussion and it makes me think a lot and reflect on this issue a lot. But yeah, I believe I'm going to keep my original position.
Thank
How about the delegate of New Cuba?
Sorry, what was the question?
So do you have any change? Was there any change?
No,
Your position?
no change in my position. As Vicky stated, I think that we're talking about quite a large spectrum, and no one's on the opposite ends. On the spectrum, we're all somewhere in between, somewhere in the middle. I just believe that there's a much higher chance of a peaceful outcome than a violent outcome, than the probability of war breaking out. I stand by that opinion with conviction.
How about on the other side, those delegates who chose that Korea is not safe from war, is there anyone who changed their opinion as well and changed to saying that Korea is safe from war? Is there anyone who changed? You guys are still keeping the opinion that Korea is not safe from war.
Zoe, up to you.
Yes, I just have something I want to say, like I agree with what the delegate from UK said. It's UK, right? Yes. But then at the same time, like it feels really safe to be here. It feels like a safe country, and that's how I felt ever since I got here. And I'm pretty sure that many Koreans feel the same, that it's safe, but then there are still these threats. And even that 1% of unsafetyness will make me say no. Like that I don't feel that Korea is safe from war because there is still that 1% or 0.5% that something might happen. And I think like if you had something in the middle, I would choose that, but you don't. So I feel like I have to choose that Korea is not safe from war. If you understand what I mean? Okay.
Yes.
I just want to add with our delegate from Sweden said, they totally agree with what you mentioned. 1% is still 1%. And just to give an example, like you, the possibility of you getting hit by a lightning strike is very small, right? But still, when there's thunderstorm outside, you try your best to go to a safe place because you know that even that 0.0001% might still happen. So I agree. I mean, yes, it's safe, but we cannot deny the fact that there's still a possibility.
Any final statements from other delegations?
I have a question though. As you said that there's still that possibility, and because that possibility exists, you think that Korea isn't safe. But where is that cutoff point? If we imagine a spectrum, at what point would you say that you're in favor for the original statement, or at which point would you be against that statement?
Yeah, that's something that I mentioned in my very first comment. It all boils down to the formal treaty, the formal acknowledgement of both sides that they will not and will never engage into any actions that might cause any armed conflict.
Right.
Yeah. So unless we don't achieve that, the black and white on the paper, then it's going to be very difficult to assume that it's totally.
So I think even though we're technically at war and there's no formal peace treaty that's been signed, it's we're at a time of peace. And if war hasn't broken out in the past 70 years, and we can assume that relationships improve between the North, South, and America, there's no reason not to think that there will be peace in the future.
So, yes.
So we're gonna start.
Says on the safety, and I think what you mentioned, what is peace? Like you said, how do you define peace? I think that's another very important topic that we need to discuss about, and that will be on section 3. So, and we mentioned that there is a paper saying that what is peace? Wait, is that correct? Yes, what is peace? So please make sure to take the time after shortly to fill out the paper, and we can talk about what is peace and how would you define peace, on what level and on what degree. Let's talk about that at section 3. And yes, regardless of the result, the more votes were leaned on the idea that Korea is not safe from war. You can also think that Korea is still peaceful because there is no war going on. But on the other hand, the Korean War is just ceased and there's no peace treaty. So that means that the world war is still going on. So that does not mean peace. So there were two very conflicting ideas, but still we both agree that it's very hard to decide whether you agree or disagree completely. And like you said, it's like a gray area, gray zone, very hard to decide. And I hope there was a middle opinion before here, but just for the sake of this discussion, we voted yes, please agree or disagree. And yes, it's undeniable fact that war is not an answer for everything, and it just only brings physical pain and pain for everyone who was involved in the war.
So you guys are already paying close attention attention to the peace. So I think we can expect more peace to, in this special relationship. Yeah. So I think we will sum up the session 1 here. So we're gonna have lunch and come back to the same side.
by 1